kept stopping, but I think I'm alright now. Hello, good afternoon. It is Tuesday, and it's the 10th of May, and I have been reading out of Life in Spirit. It was written by Harry Edwards in 1976, and he describes here in the sleeve note that this is the story of John and Mary, any John, any Mary, brother and sister, husband and wife, sweethearts, friends. The story of you and me. But with a difference. John and Mary have died and have entered into their new life in spirit. He, Harry Edwards, was known throughout the world as a very well-known spiritual healer, and he was an author of many books, and he had a healing sanctuary, which I think is still in existence. This was published in 1976 in Guildford. And I am now at chapter number 6, How Things Are Made. John and Mary found themselves members of a large party at the Temple of Nuclear Understanding, who wished to learn how things are made in the spirit way of life. Most of the assembly were newcomers to spirit life, just like John, but there were others who'd made the change of life a long time ago in earth years, but who had previously shown no active interest in a continued life motif. The congregation was arranged round an amphitheatre, in the centre of which was the teacher, a lady of serene and dignified bearing. She was standing by a large circular table on which lay a shimmering mass of tiny, many-hued shapes. After her welcome to the students, she said she would proceed with the simplest explanations, and she selected one small fragment from the mass on the table. She described it as a little world, complete in itself. It is an atom, the smallest and simplest example of matter, but it provides a vital service in our life as it does in earth life. It is called a hydrogen atom. As she held it, so it enlarged, big enough for everyone to see the movement within it. This had already been described on page 16. This is page 38. The teacher told her audience that earthly scientists had discovered over 200 different kinds of atoms, but in spirit life there are many more. There are some of them, and she pointed to these are some of them, and she pointed to the scintillating mass on the table. Every atom is a highly organized energy structure, possessing very powerful potentials, as some minds on Earth have learned to use very unwisely. She was referring to nuclear fusion and the production of hydrogen and atom bombs. The atom can be described as a powerful engine, possessing strong characteristics and purpose. It is much more than an engine, for it has an intelligence which can command it to perform in a multitude of ways. It can be happy and contented, or, when it becomes associated with other atoms whose intelligence and purpose is in opposition, deeply frustrated. The lecturer pointed out that it is the simple hydrogen atom human scientists found to be the most suitable agent for creating disruptive forces. Atoms, therefore, are individuals. They have their likes and dislikes. They willingly blend with some other atoms when their properties harmonize with each other. They like to receive and experience the influence of some forces, but not others. Selecting 3 other different pieces she knew her audience would be familiar with, she showed the different internal movements within each atom. One was the element of gold, and the other 2 of iron and tin. She placed the iron and tin elements together, and immediately there was seen to be an interplay of the moving electrons within both atoms, and with this also came a joining together of their intelligence, and therefore of purpose too. When the gold elemental atom was placed against either the iron or the tin atom, there was no interplay. They continued their normal functioning, independent and ignoring each other. The teacher developed her explanations further and demonstrated how a force, energy, could bring about a change in the condition of the element. To illustrate this, she showed how a flow of magnetic force could attract friendly elements when the flow was in one direction, but repel when the magnetic flow was reversed. It is hoped that the reader's time need not be taken up with further explanations of the effect of other forces on the elements, heat, cohesion, gravity, electricity, light, and so on, but proceed to the time when the teacher introduced a new and very important factor, which was unknown to John or the others. The listeners were told that energy was creation itself, and it was from this that all things came in both dimensions of life. Existence began when this energy received character and purpose, becoming subjective to forces and other elemental associations. It became subjective to the intelligently directed force of thought. Primarily, matter structures first obey the natural forces, according to the law of cause and effect. For instance, how heat could bring about new properties in the operation of atomic function, or, for instance, how glass can be shattered by certain sound radiations. Interrupting the narrative, John told Mary that, as the teacher described the different processes affecting substances, it seemed to him he was visualizing her thoughts as if he was listening into her mind, and therefore was able to understand the meanings and explanations without doubts arising, though there were questions he would like to ask. Mary nodded and said, "That is how we learn to understand each other, and you have done well to let your mind merge with the instructress so soon. It took me much longer." The lecturer stressed how important it was to know that everything has form, and form is a precise characterization of energy. This applies to all things, material things, forces, light, color, sounds, vision, and thoughts. All forms of energy are associated in one way or another with other forms, and all can be influenced by each other, and particularly by attuned thought. There is the range of sound vibration, all of which are recordable experiences, as shown on television, sounds which can move sensitive materials, increasing in number as sounds ascend higher in the scales until they are too high for the human ear to receive them, but which can be heard by other ears, such as by the dog. As the vibrations ascend in frequency, so they enter into the realm of light. There are also graded into recordable experiences. These are also graded into recordable experiences from the infrared range up to the ultraviolet and beyond. Carry the process higher still, and it enters into the highest realm of organized force that is open to our experience, that of thought. It may not stop there. It is logical to assume it further ascends into the divine scheme of things. It has been demonstrated by Uri Geller how he can exert a physical change in the state of metals through thought, and this act has been repeatable by others, including children. Whether Uri Geller's powers are factual or not, we have the picture of how a thought force can exert an influence on the state of matter. The instructress continued her explanation by drawing attention to the different functions each atom possesses. When they are allied to a different atom, a molecule is formed, resulting in a combination of thought and purpose, bringing the conclusion that matter is not inert, but possesses a degree of activity and intellect, which is receptive to other atomic intellects, which are in tune with it. In spirit life, thought intellect is all-powerful. It is dominant. It communicates with and controls the energies within other elemental atoms, within the laws which govern that special aspect of energy intelligence. Through the study by human chemists, many of these atomic properties are known and used in everyday life. The spirit chemist also uses his more advanced knowledge in spirit life activity, and by means of communication can influence earthly activity too. The instructress proceeded to demonstrate this. She told her audience she would draw by thought from the mass of atoms on the table those she needed to make the raw material from which a potter could shape a vessel. She reminded those in her audience who possessed memories of recent human activities how the earthly scientists had succeeded in chemically producing a new substance, called plastic, giving rise to a new kind of moldable material. She said she intended to carry out by thought a similar task through her knowledge of the properties of the energies contained within the elemental atoms. She stood by the table, and the audience saw arise from the mass a flow of different particles in an orderly procession to her hands, some in greater numbers than others. As they settled there, so they mingled and joined together into a mass. The teacher said, "We will now bring color into it," and another stream of atoms arose from the same mass, entering into the substance, giving it a blue radiance. "This," she said, "is now the raw material the clay the potter needs, and as he shapes this to his creative thoughts, they will blend with the intellect of the substance. So when it is fashioned, the vessel will not only carry with it the qualities of the energies of which the vessel is made, but any observing mind will be able to perceive the thought theme expressing his experience of beauty and design, which had reached a state of progression equal to the potter's." From this example, the lecturer went on. "You have the elementary picture of the means with which all that you see and use are brought into being. If you desire to build a house, you will first obtain a sanction. Then you will go to an architect, and he will look within your mind and so understand what your desires are, and discuss them with you. When you are fully pleased and feel at one with a plan, you next go to the builder, who is a chemist, able to draw from the elements the materials you like best, a mass in correct shape and size. These he uses to actually build the house by assembling the components in order. So whatever is needed can be obtained as you seek it, and have reason for its purpose to serve you. Perhaps you will benefit from learning your first lesson by knowing that in this life you need nothing at all, and it is only when your desire for self-expression becomes active that you earn the right to enter into the community, and then, having received it, you build your house, or use another, and seek all other things you need. Then you will choose the direction in which you can make your contribution to life in appreciation of your right to an unending life, and enter into the progress which leads you towards a finer and closer perfection with the Creator. One may be able to obtain a clearer idea of the manner in which those in spirit life are able to manipulate elemental energies by thought, and if we try to trace back that which takes place when an organic, medically incurable affliction is healed through spirit healing. Let us say that the patient was one who had suffered from a spinal lesion for many years. In the beginning, the doctor diagnosed what is commonly termed as slipped disc, or perhaps we should say a prolapsed intervertebral disc. A prolapsed intervertebral disc. He receives prolonged hospital treatment with traction, forceful manipulations under anesthetic, radiation, physiotherapy, massage, surgical fusing of several vertebrae by means of a bone splint, water baths, and so on, without being able to lessen the stress and pain. He was fitted with a steel-based corset designed to prevent any spinal movement. Finally, he was told there was nothing more medical science could do for him, and he was allowed to unlimited supply of pain-killing tablets. The spine could no longer bend, and movement ceased as the vertebrae became ankylosed and cemented together as the arthritis then began to set in. These adhesions started pressure upon the sciatic nerves, making them numb and ultimately inducing paralysis of the legs. To human science this was a hopeless, incurable condition. Then the patient went to see a healer before whom he sat, wearing his steel corset. The healer let his hand travel down the spine, over the corset, and was immediately aware that the patient had a poker back, a physical, immovable spine. He placed one hand on the spine in the lumbar region, and with his other hand on the patient's shoulder, he simply said, "Let your back bend slowly backwards." As he did so, the healer felt the locked-up curved spine yield and bend, without causing the patient even a twinge of pain. Soon this process was repeated from the neck bone down to the tailbone. The spine was able to bend sideways left and right in a swinging, gentle movement, and could then rotate the vertebrae as the body twisted round each way. With this, the pressure on the nerves emerging from between the vertebrae disappeared, and the patient could move his legs freely and without pain. It took barely a few minutes for this transformation. Indeed, the time expended on this case was spent mainly in demonstrating to the patient that he was free from pain, stiffness, and stress. To recapitulate the essential facts, the spine was doubly locked with ossification and arthritic adhesions, developing continual pain and paralysis of both legs. A totally incurable condition according to medical science. Within a few minutes of spiritual healing, the spine becomes fully flexible. The impoverished and dehydrated discs or cushions between the vertebrae are restored to a state of healthy functioning. All pain vanishes, pressures on the nerves are removed, and the symptoms of paralysis yield to control and coordination. All this within a fragment of time. Such healings of spinal lesions are not rare. They take place every day in healing sanctuaries. There is a standing invitation to the British Medical Association to provide, say, 10 or 12 of their own patients who have been under hospital treatment and specialist care, and whose troubles are unyielding to the medical treatment, and the author, with other healers, will endeavour to demonstrate the restoration of such spinal conditions to mobility and the overcoming of the consequent ill effects, similar to the typical case I just mentioned. This offer to the British Medical Association is made by the editor of Psychic News, and the author has issued a similar invitation. These invitations have been repeated in the press a number of times in recent years, but the British Medical Association has refused to take part. It is not difficult for any observer to see the reasons why. To trace back the means by which so drastic a physical change for the better is able to take place, we need to review the attendant circumstances at the site of the affliction and apply our knowledge of physical chemistry to the situation. With ossification of the bone's substance merge and join, so that where there was a joint the mechanism of movement is destroyed. The arthritic deposits of calcium carbonate settle between the vertebrae and cement the two surfaces together, rendering all movement impossible. In addition, arthritis also settles in the ligaments, contracting and knotting them, which provides another reason why the bones concerned are not able to move, and any attempted movement stretches the ligaments, causing great pain. Before the locked-up vertebrae, or indeed any other joint, can move, the cement must be taken away. No one can open a door which is screwed up. The screws must first be removed before the door can open, and probably the hinges, which will need some lubrication for smooth operation. The calcium carbonate is composed of molecules of calcium, carbon, and oxygen. To change their state, it is necessary to introduce into them some additional element properties, to change their nature and to release its hold on the joint. Another possibility is that a force is directed to the substance, which can either change its form or can break up the formation of prescribed elemental atom, thus allowing the remainder of the molecule formation to break up. This is not fancy, for it happens every day. By applying heat to calcium carbonate, a change in its formation takes place. Apply great heat to a hydrogen atom, and it will break up, leading to a nuclear explosion. We have evidence in spiritual healing of both healer and a patient being conscious of a considerable penetrating heat when the healer's hands are in close proximity to the patient's trouble. This heat is not a clinical heat, it is a spiritual force, because when a thermometer is interposed between the healer's hand and the patient's body, there is no alteration in the registering of heat degrees. A first conclusion can be reached, and this is that an additional molecular potential is directed to the particular physical molecular state, and to nowhere else. or that a force is directed to the diseased matter, which breaks up its atomic formations. By whatever means the change is made, one cannot escape from the truth that a chemical change has taken place in the impeding substances to allow a joint to move without being harmed. Secondly, that nature, strength, and composition of the remedial energies have their origin in the spirit dimension of life. Thirdly, there must come a time when the spirit-formed energies are transformed into their physical counterparts in order to bring about the planned chemical change. Fourthly, there must be a thought directive responsible for each of these processes. Fifthly, there must be an operating intelligence responsible for the whole healing process, from the original application for the healing, the establishment of a true diagnosis, the organization of the remedial forces, the direction of the characterized healing forces to the person and thence to the area of affliction. Thus the whole process is carried out in a positive way by thought control. This is especially obvious with absent healing. If we return to the explanation of the instructress to her pupils, it can now be visualized. We do not possess any positive knowledge of the mechanics whereby spirit intelligences are able to assemble the remedial elemental energies and to contain them in a condition for transference to a patient via the healer, or, in the case of absent healing, to the spirit self of the patient. But this does happen. From the evidence we possess, we can draw conclusions which appear logical. If in the dimension of spirit one is able to acquire new wisdom, then it is logical to assume there are places where such teachings can be obtained. These have been spoken of many times by spirit guides through their mediums as halls of learning. It is equally logical to suppose there are spirit laboratories, where study of both physical and spirit laws governing the use of energy is carried out. Spirit horrors. Our scientists have succeeded in breaking up the organization of a hydrogen atom, and by doing so releasing such a tremendous power of energy that it threatens the continuation of the existence of this planet. To break up a hydrogen atom, vast laboratory space covering many acres of ground is necessary, but in spirit life no such similar apparatus would be necessary, any more than there are juggernauts, cars, or hovercraft in spirit. We should not discount the story of John's lesson from the instructors too quickly. If thought is a force, then it is the most powerful force we know of, except perchance that of life force which animates matter in this and other dimensions. Thought force is a higher ordered vibration than any other form of energy. Even in the dull human way it can influence matter. It can influence for good the overcoming of disease and affliction. It is therefore reasonable to consider in an advanced state of life that this potential can be developed to allow, through thought, cooperation and control of elemental energies and their manipulation as described by the instructors. Let us examine the position further. In the United Kingdom there are over 5,000 accredited healer members of the National Federation of Spiritual Healers, and it is estimated there are a further 5,000 healers who are members of other organizations, churches, etc., and those who do not name themselves as belonging to any organization. It is not possible to truly assess the number of healers actively practicing healing in the British Commonwealth, where several countries have affiliated to our own national federation, but it must add up to a very large number. I hope so. In the United States of America, the number of practicing healers is well over 20,000. The same story is told in Europe and Africa, where independent state associations are also affiliated, and spiritual healing, as we understand it, is also carried out in India and Japan. In September 1975, a World Federation of Healing was formed. Thus the healing movement is worldwide, and there can be little doubt that healings of incurably compatibility takes place with them all, otherwise the efforts would have waned and died away. Instead, there is an ever-increasing success, with more and more sick people seeking healing aid, and all this has arisen from successes in healing illnesses, for which medical science can do no more. Every patient is individual. Each sickness and affliction varies from person to person. The quality of the healing energy needed to overcome the cause and symptoms of trouble with each patient must also be relative to the sufferer. Strength, sighting organs affected, mental outlook, and so on. Every healing is personal and requires an independent diagnosis, which applies an individual assessment of both the cause of the trouble and the nature of the beneficial treatment to be directed for the sick one. This review returns us to the problem of what is thought to be the means by which the healing forces are assembled and directed to the patient. It is that there is one great central hall of healing, to which the spirit doctors and guides have access, and where the tens of thousands of earth sufferers are studied and their problems assessed? Or could it be that with the aid of a great many spirit chemists of advanced wisdom, the very particular molecular energy structures are prepared and given to the healing guide, who then transfers them to his patient? It could be that a number of these halls of healing are available, though when we are told that distance is of little account in spirit life, different centers should not be needed. In our conjectures, perhaps the more simple modus operandi will be favored. To do this, we shall need to envisage that those who act for us as healing guides or doctors have acquired an advanced knowledge of the physical and spiritual laws which govern life, its energies, and how they can be made to cooperate with each other. It is so that if this is so, then we should be more prepared to accept the ability of spirit-controlled thought to have mastery over energies and forces, in a similar way to that which the instructress used her knowledge to make clay, and the weaver to prepare the raiment for the tailor, and the builder for his particular materials. The spirit doctor associated with the healer makes his own diagnosis, and from his knowledge of the properties and use of energies is able by thought to assess and prepare the corrective molecular energies, or direct the ameliorative forces the patient needs to get him or her well. Well, this was written in 1976, and doesn't it seem a long time ago in a language sort of way? Anyhow, he ran a Harry Edwards spiritual healing sanctuary in Barolea, Shire, Guildford and Surrey, and this is what he looks like. So, have a good Tuesday. Bye-bye.